Hello, here's the audience. Five people, actually six. Imagine working full-time commuting through toxic air and broken streets, only to return home to mold-covered walls, roach droppings, and the sound of your child struggling to breathe. The U.S. affordable housing crisis has evolved into a public health emergency which demands federal intervention to enforce inclusionary zoning requirements on states. The audience needs to hear this information because it impacts millions of families and creates health problems while affecting economic stability and social justice. The research I conducted using academic and policy sources with respected credentials allowed me to understand the fundamental causes and actual effects of housing inequality. The presentation will begin by analyzing health and social consequences of the housing emergency before discussing inclusionary zoning as a vital solution that requires federal leadership. Let's start by understanding how deep and dangerous the housing crisis truly is. Main points. The housing crisis is a public health emergency. Supporting material. Millions of families reside in homes that contain mold together with roaches and lead dust and inadequate insulation. Past year 2002 states that substandard housing leads to asthma and neurological damage and malnutrition and psychological disorders, which primarily affects low-income families and children of color. The number of child asthma cases rose by 70% throughout the period from 1982 to 1994. Inner city housing continues to harbor lead poisoning, which inflicts permanent damage to residents. Emotional appeal. The children who suffer from asthma and learning disabilities and unsafe living conditions represent actual members of our community rather than mere statistics. Ouch. But local action is not enough. Here's why we need federal leadership. Main point. Inclusionary zoning is an effective, proven solution. The implementation of inclusionary zoning forces developers to allocate specific percentages of other housing units for low-income family affordability. Supporting material. The masterclass states that inclusionary zoning produces affordable housing while simultaneously fighting economic segregation and building diverse neighborhoods. The implementation of inclusionary zoning policies in cities has resulted in the construction of thousands of affordable units without harming developer expansion. Supporting material. The Harvard Housing Study demonstrates that housing and affordability has reached its highest point in history, thus requiring zoning reform to fulfill national housing needs. Emotional appeal. Affordable housing should be accessible to everyone because it represents a fundamental human right. Let's wrap up with what this change could mean for America's families. Main point. Federal policy must lead in standardized reform. The delegation of zoning authority to local governments result in inconsistent zoning practices which frequently lead to exclusionary policies. Supporting material. The cities of Cleveland and rural Appalachia are leading innovation efforts, but their ability to scale up and maintain sustainability remains restricted because of the lack of federal backing. A federal mandate for states to establish inclusionary zoning programs would create national uniformity while utilizing funding resources and strengthening local community initiatives. The transformation of zoning practice will determine public health outcomes and economic stability and social equity. The housing crisis continues to deteriorate while causing damage to family health and well-being. The housing crisis requires inclusionary zoning as a workable and expandable solution. Federal policy has the power to unite different stakeholders while providing funding and accelerating this transformation. The lack of immediate reform threatens to create a generation that will experience poor health while being physically and socially isolated. Housing justice equals health justice. We can start creating future where every child breathes clean air, every parent can sleep without fear, and every home is built with dignity through zoning reform today. And for the visual aids. This map visualizes the shortage of affordable housing across every U.S. county. It focuses on extremely low-income renters, those earning less than 30% of the area's median income. And this chart also shows like the same thing. Yeah. Thank you. And here's the audience.